Speaker's Corner really became the forum for the masses after a cholera epidemic in 1854, which resulted in the establishment blaming the working classes for spreading disease, the way they lived, the way they drank too much, the way they missed. You know the Hogarth's picture of Gin Lane and Lane, everyone like raucous, drunk everywhere. So this was the atmosphere that was blamed for disease of cholera in 1854. And so the layers of the establishment, the old establishment, the aristocracy, they tried to pass laws in 1855 that restricted access to drinking. They banned sale of alcohol on Sundays. And Sunday was the only day the workers had free. So what it meant was they had a sort of banned it in London. So you had an area of London like a tier 4 area nowadays they call it, and next door was a tier 3 area. So Richmond, you get on the train to Richmond, all the workers left central London, went to Richmond, got drunk on Sunday afternoon and then came back. And then the establishment also said, well, we can't have workers not going to church. We must train them to be, 1, temperate, don't drink too much, and 2, respect Sunday and don't go out like partying and don't even go shopping. They banned them from shopping on Sunday. So what happened was, over there by the Serpentine, every summer, it was called the summer season. So the aristocrats, the children of the aristocrats, you know those people you see in the period TV dramas from Jane Austen and all that, they would all come to London, and the Serpentine, Rotten Row, the road along the Serpentine, was the Tinder of the day. Yeah, it's where the elite matched up. Oh, Lord so-and-so, have you met my daughter? Like that, you know. And that's the way they met up and associated. So when this beer law and the Sunday trading law was being introduced in 1855, the workers got together and they called for a revival of Chartism and protest against the Sunday trading law and the beer bill. So they said the way we're going to protest is we're going to go to Hyde Park and we're going to see how the aristocrats observe Sunday. So they went down there. There was all the rich were driving around their horse and carriages. This is in June 1855. And 150,000 plebs came out of the poor parts of London and came to Hyde Park. And they jeered and shouted at the passing horses and carriages. And then they got horses turned and threw it at the horse and carriages. Then they got Bibles and threw Bibles at them. They cackled and howled and shouted at them. The police turned up, and there was a scandal a few months before, or a month or so before, where police officers had gone around and grabbed geese in the park from the lake, killed them and eaten them for themselves. And so then people were said, where are the geese? Ask the police. He shouted all these slogans out against the police. The police started getting angry, like PC Berry at Speaker's Corner, and then they pulled out their truncheons and went around just whacking people. The problem is in Hyde Park, when you go around whacking people, you never know who you're going to hit. So they found people, you know, they're amongst the plebs, there were barristers, there were officers, the soldiers and so on. And the soldiers came out of the barracks, the Chelsea barracks just over there, they had a barracks there at the time, and supported the protesters. So there's an interesting point.
Yeah.
So what happened was that protest movement defeated the government. There was an inquiry by Parliament, ordered by Lord Palmerston. There was an inquiry into the Hyde Park riots of June 1855, and it was 600 pages long. I've got the book at home, and I've posted some of it on speakerscorner.net. And in that inquiry, they interview about 100 people who were present on the day, and they show that the police were brutally attacking people without any cause. And so the consequence of that was that the government had to basically castigate the police, try and modernise their behaviour, make their relationship to the public change, and reduce the amount of violence they used against the public in general. And then later, so that was really what established the authority of the masses over Hyde Park in 1855. And it was 1867 that the Reform League The Reform League was an organisation composed of liberals and Marxists, so from that spectrum. It was set up by the London Working Men's Association. Half of the London Men's Working Association were in Karl Marx's International, and another half were just lay trade unionists. And they called for this organisation called the Reform League to protest for the right to vote for men, universal suffrage for men at the time. Women wasn't included at the time. They called a protest in June 1866, which tore down the railings of Hyde Park, and then they burst into Hyde Park because they were supposed to be closed out from Hyde Park. When they got into Hyde Park, the police and soldiers were turned against them. They managed to have a pitched battle in Hyde Park on that day, or 2 days I think it was, and then eventually the government capitulated because they saw that the riots were so violent and explosive that they needed to make some concessions. So they granted the concession for the right to vote for all men who paid more than £10 in rent a year, which was the majority, but it was still a limited franchise. It wasn't a full extent. So the 1832 reform law and then the 1867 reform law, and both of them were victories for the masses over the space of Speaker's Corner and Hyde Park. And then in 1872, in order to formalise this and try and take the steam out of the battle at Hyde Park, or the battles for Hyde Park, the government passed a bylaw to the park, which was called the Parks and Gardens Act, and it said there is a speaker's area of Hyde Park which goes from the corner over there to the furthest tree over there into the corner of the park. It runs along here up until where those people in the distance are, so near the trees over there, and you'll find over there's a circular stone memorial called the Tyburn Tree Memorial Reform League, and then it goes across here to where the Winter Wonderland is starting. So that pathway is actually, part of it is still in Speaker's Corner, so it goes right across there. It's actually a bit further back than this. So Winter Wonderland is occupying part of what is Speaker's Corner at the moment. And then it goes across to the Grosvenor Hotel. So all this area is defined by the regulations, by the Parks and Gardens Act, as Speaker's Corner. And that's how it was established. And it became the focal point for protests and demonstrations from the 1850s up until modern times. And in the last year we had to defend it quite determinedly in order to make sure that we continue to have the right to speak it. We even went to High Court, myself and Piers Corbyn, to get a High Court injunction against the police intervening at our election rallies here when we stood in the election in May for the London Assembly, and Piers stood for the Mayor of London. And the judge in that case said that he could not deny that we had the right to speak at Speaker's Corner. So that was granted, but what he did deny was, he said we didn't have a right to assemble people. So as soon as we stood up and spoke, someone gathered, and then they broke the regulations of the number of people allowed, then of course they could arrest us. And then they said, well, we can't automatically say that you're not going to commit some crime, and therefore we can't permit you to speak in this legislation to stop the police from intervening. But nevertheless, we did make the case, and the judges did have to accept that we had the right to speak here. The regulations are very bizarre that they had in place that said, they had the right to stop people from gathering. And those legislations have never been in place in any country in the world. Until 2020, they've never been in place anywhere in the world before that. In Stalinist Russia, there was never a regulation only two people can get together. Never. In fact, not even two people together. The first time I was arrested the second time I was arrested last year was the 5th of November in Trafalgar Square, or just after Charing Cross Road. And the charge was supposed to be gathering in a group of more than two. More than two. Stalinist Russia. Hitler's Germany never had that regulation. So only psychotic pharmaceutical and tech companies could invent such madness. So the battle goes on.
Yeah, absolutely, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
.net is the website. I don't update it much, but it does hold important information on it about that type of issue.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Heiko. That's excellent.